Hi, my name is Melissa Shaner, and this is prompt one for my capstone for my master's in elementary education. A quick overview of my lesson is that students were to create a shadow puppet play based off of a nursery rhyme that they chose, and I'll go into more detail throughout my prompt. But students use key details and story elements in their rhyme to make sure that they had all the puppet pieces they needed for their final performance. The lesson I designed integrated two first grade standards of physical science, S1P1, and a reading literacy RL3 standard. And in science, students explored light and shadows, investigating how light makes objects visible, comparing light sources, and experimenting with shadows at different distances. And then in literacy, they describe characters, settings, and major events in a story using key details while reinforcing comprehension and also connecting their key details to their science learning. For the science standard, during this lesson, students should be able to describe how light is necessary to see objects during a shadow show that they create. Explain that without light, objects cannot be seen, and discuss how their puppets were only visible when placed in front of a light source. And then compare the differences that the two main light sources that we use, which were the flashlights and the lamps, made the size and brightness of their puppets vary. And they should be able to demonstrate how shadows change when the distance of an object is changed closer or further from their light source. And students should also share their observations and findings in their science journal and through class discussion. And for this lesson, the teacher needs to have background knowledge in teaching the basic physical science concepts related to light and how to use developmentally appropriate teaching strategies to make these concepts more accessible for first graders. For the reading standard in this lesson, students need to be able to identify the main characters and setting in their chosen nursery rhyme, and they need to understand character traits and how that might affect their character's reaction in their puppet show. And then they need to sequence events in order using differentiated graphic organizers. Then they need to act out the major events in their nursery rhyme, including telling the beginning, the middle, and the end of their rhymes and focusing on specific details that happened in their rhymes. And for the standards, teachers need strong understanding of what the story elements are in general and what they include from each nursery rhyme. And teachers also need to use literacy strategies, scaffolding, and differentiation to help their students comprehend and retell the rhymes and pre-teach and then go over the vocabulary in the rhymes that might be confusing or misunderstood. Differentiation is an instructional strategy that meets students' diverse needs by ensuring engagement and success. And Tomlinson describes differentiation as adjusting instruction to create the best learning experience, while Saban emphasized tailoring lessons to students' readiness, interest, and their differing learning styles. It's not about creating like individual lessons for each student, but adapting the content and the process and then the products that we're expecting students to create to support all learners. And I won't go over each part of this graphic, but I wanted to include it because the flowchart gives examples to teachers on just different types of instructional strategies that we can all use when differentiating for our students. Pedagogical content knowledge, or PCK, as defined by Schulman, is a unique blend of teaching expertise and subject matter knowledge. So teachers must adapt our methods to fit students' needs and their learning styles and their interest, making concepts engaging and accessible to our students, and connecting learning to real life scenarios like creating a shadow puppet play and fostering active participation and a deeper understanding of the content that we're teaching. So what does this look like in my personal classroom? Differentiation looks like flexible groupings, varying assessment strategies, which you'll see when students explain the key details in their nursery rhymes, and modeling for students, and also conferencing and then providing feedback to students. PCK in my classroom looks like providing students with multisensory learning, providing scaffolding, and then giving students choice in the creative ways to explore the content that we're looking at, and also the repetition of skills and standards that spiral throughout the year, and continued opportunities to practice those skills. So the first instructional strategy I used was hands-on learning, which according to Piaget, it actively engages students in constructing their own knowledge through experience. And research shows that learning is more meaningful when students explore and interpret concepts like through their own actions. And to support comprehension, I incorporated multiple learning styles and collaborative learning by using the graphic organizers, which is supported by Marzano, Pickering, and Pollock's research to structure their thinking before the students actually created their shadow puppet plays to explore the lights and the shadows. And this approach kept students engaged and minimized their off-task behavior. It encouraged teamwork with my active monitoring and then open-ended questioning to further support their exploration while they were looking at the shadows. So hands-on learning in this lesson allowed me to meet the diverse needs of all students by engaging them in shadow exploration through a puppet show based on their chosen nursery rhyme using various light sources. So they had flashlights and the spotlight lamp. Students worked collaboratively to investigate how shadows form and change, and the strategy naturally incorporated differentiation as students explored the light sources, helping me set up the shadow theater, adjusting the spotlight placement, and creating puppets. Either some of them did it from scratch or had pre-made cutouts. Scaffolding was evident through the student-led visuals and graphic organizers from our previous foundations and benchmark units that they were using when they were completing this task. And it helped readers connect new learning to what we had been previously taught. And so it also used multisensory learning. It was embedded, allowing students to engage visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically while collaborating and performing and giving feedback to peers, and by offering flexible participation options, including independent or group work and recorded performances. The lesson also ensured that all students could engage in the learning experience.
Okay. So you just said that you could use this
one, and you can
as
watch
the
them
house
on your own time.
and the market.
But
How
these
can
are
you
my
use this as the
artifacts
house
for you to
in the
explore.
market?
The first artifact just shows two students who are using a
To make
flashlight
what
as
bigger?
their light source, and they have their first cut out their puppet, and they're just exploring
Okay, so
what's happening with the shape.
so when your
and
light source
size.
gets closer
The
to your
middle
object,
video
what happens
is
to the
actually
shadow?
a student who was working with this little piggy went to
Show
the
me.
market, and he had cut out his house.
So then
he wished
that's
that
your
the market looked
market?
exactly like it.
Okay, then what's
but
your
he
house
wished
gonna
it
be?
was bigger. So I just
So you're gonna
asked
use the
him
same
to
object for your
open-ended
house
questions
in your
about what he
market?
was noticing,
You're
and then I
just
walked
gonna
away
do
to
what?
give him some think time, and he came back
Yeah, that's
super
fine. We
excited
can move that,
because he had
though.
figured out
We
that
can move
he
that
could
light
just
source.
use the same cutout
I will.
for both places in the settings of his story.
But what
if we
happens
just
when you
changed the
move
distance
the light source?
of his light source. So
What does?
I just had him explain his
The shadow
discovery
does. Okay.
in that video.
When does the
And
shadow
then
get
third
bigger?
artifact is just two
When you put what
students,
closer?
and it is an
Okay.
example
And what
of
happens
their
when
shadow puppet play
you want it
of
smaller?
the Itsy Bitsy Spider. So after each instructional strategy, I just provided some areas of strengths and improvements that I could do in the lesson, but I'll touch on these as a whole at the end of the presentation. So my second instructional strategy I used was graphic organizers, which help students organize and comprehend information visually. And research by Levin and Seawalk show that graphic organizers improve thinking by connecting new concepts with prior knowledge. And I integrated them into the shadow puppet storytelling activity, reinforcing both their literacy and their science standards. And then I was able to link it back to our previous foundation and benchmark units that we do in reading. And this approach supported various learning styles by combining visual organization, collaboration, and hands-on exploration. And then Zier's research highlights how graphic organizers enhance comprehension and problem solving across subjects. And in this lesson, they helped Striving students process information while providing a clear structure for everyone to stay engaged and focused. So graphic organizers supported students by helping them plan their puppets and sequence events for their nursery rhyme performance. And so to differentiate for all my learners, my striving learners were in a small group. We read the rhyme, and then we sequenced pre-made event cards from the beginning of the story, middle, and end. And then they chose between completing graphic organizer with transitional words or just using our class anchor chart to verbally retell the story and illustrate their characters and their setting. So visual supports like the key details anchor chart provided additional cues, and then students had the choice to respond through writing or drawing, ensuring that all learners were able to access the project that we were doing and the task at hand. And the strategy reinforced a reading skill within a science lesson, highlighting how content areas are all connected. So this first artifact, you'll see the different graphic organizers that were used. So the first one is the Itsy Bitsy Spider, and we read it, and then there's the sequencing cards. And then the student chose the graphic organizer that had the transitional words on it, so then he could use them as cues when we retelling his nursery rhyme. And the other student is verbally retelling the beginning, middle, and end of his story by physically running his fingers over our event mountain on our anchor chart that we've made previously in class. In the middle of the artifacts, there's this student referring back to our anchor chart, and she realized that she had forgotten a portion of her setting. So she changed it from just saying the setting was outside to the story took place outside during the day in a rainstorm. And the photo all the way to the right shows one group, their graphic organizer, Rain, Rain, Go Away, and they just drew the information and the key details in the graphic organizer. And then the students that were working on Rockabye Baby, they chose to write their information in words on their graphic organizer. So again, I want to provide detailed strengths and areas of improvement for each strategy, but I'll go over like an overview at the end. And so the third and last strategy I incorporated was cooperative learning, where students worked in small structured groups to achieve a common goal while being accountable for their contributions, which is pointed out to be effective in Johnson & Johnson Whole Books research. And in these groups, students discussed, provided feedback, and collaborated, enhancing their teamwork, engagement, and motivation. And the strategy encouraged active participation as students shared their findings and practiced active listening skills. And it also supported behavior management as the students were excited to work with their peers, stay on task, and complete the project, reinforcing their desire that they wanted to continue to work on projects together throughout the year. So this strategy allowed me to meet my students' needs by providing opportunities for collaboration, discussion, planning, and peer feedback towards a common goal. And differentiation occurred naturally as striving learners received peer support. My ELLs engaged with authentic vocabulary and sentence stems to develop language skills, and my thriving learners took on leadership roles and participated in higher level problem-solving discussions. And so my artifacts here on this page, you'll see two students all the way to the left. They had picked out and made a plan of who was creating which shadow puppet. And then in the middle, this group, they're all actually working on the same task, but they each had different graphic organizers to support their needs. And then to the far right, the students were actually practicing their performance before we did it whole group. And they were providing feedback to each other and asking each other questions and making sure that they were ready for their performance. So my overall, when I looked at my strengths and my weaknesses and which ones were connected, strengths of all the strategies included high student engagement, collaboration, and improved communication and teamwork skills. And students demonstrated a deeper understanding of the key details and vocabulary while participating in differentiated tasks that met their individual learning needs. And areas for improvement would be my time management and pacing, as some students spent too much time on drawing the puppet creations and leaving less time to assess like their understanding beyond just the shadow puppet play. And so I also could have provided rubrics for their peer feedback to enhance their learning process. And this last slide is my references, and thank you for listening.